let's start, and the others can join us in a few minutes. So welcome to the first round of discussions on security aspects of online meetings. The idea here, we have about 15 minutes. So the idea here is, of course, we are all moved into using the online space and discussions more and more with the social distancing measures. And probably this is what everyone mentions as a new normal. There will have to be more and more distance in a physical way and turn to more and more meetings. But of course, there are a lot of, or there are certain at least, security aspects related to this increased online participation. So we have about 15 minutes to run through a couple of discussion questions. There will be a poll and some of the interaction. Before I introduce the moderator of the session, let me just tell you the format of the session. So basically, we'll guide the discussion, and at any point you're invited, or during the session, you're invited to share your comments within chat, and I'll follow up on the chat feed and then report back to the moderator, or raise a hand. You have an option to raise a hand, and then we'll simply, by the order of raising the hand, give the voice allowance to every one of you. But please, if you decide to come up with voice, make sure that your comment is sort of a tweet up to 30 seconds, because it will be many of us, so we have to be very cautious on that. I pass the floor now to Ms. Trisha Octaviano, who will be the moderator of this chat today. So, well, Trisha, the floor is yours, and you can take over.
Good evening, everyone. Greetings from Singapore. So before we begin the discussion, we will run a short poll. As you spend more and more time online in this new world that we live in, do you have some worries when you're attending virtual meetings? So we'd like to ask you in this poll what your concerns are. So we have multiple answers there. It can be that your platform might crash, or the application might be infected, or you can be sharing infected documents. Another thing is that intruders might show up, or your conversation records can leak. Personal data of participants may also be compromised. So go ahead and select your choice. Okay. So while we record your votes, which will probably take about, well, less than 30 seconds, I'd like to emphasize that in normal times, when you are online on your mobile phone and working, in normal times, you're already open to hacking. So how much more now that we are in a new normal? And the chances of you getting threats more and more are higher. Okay. Let's wait a bit more. Okay. Okay. Now, let's see. Our top result, personal data of participants may be compromised, which personally I think it's something that is already expected, because data privacy is now the current currency. And there are actually a lot of ways wherein data can actually be breached. Before we continue on looking into the other top choices, I'd like to ask if any one of you has experienced any compromised data, either the data of your participants or you yourself. So, let's see. Anyone? Okay, so while we're waiting for anyone from our group to share their experience, personal data can get compromised in a number of ways. One is when you are joining a meeting and you're using an insecure Wi-Fi connection, it makes you vulnerable. So you have to remember that data can be intercepted when you are connected in a public Wi-Fi, for instance. Another thing is that, for example, you accidentally share your wrong screen, and there can also be an authorized recording of your meeting. So there's a possibility of an intrusion. Another thing is, let's see, 50%, 11 of the 22 says third-party retention of data. This is very interesting in the sense that I'm not sure if you're aware that online conferencing tools can actually generate metadata about your participants. It can be the IP address, it can be their devices, or any other variables that can reveal personal information. And personal information is something that we always have to safeguard. And this metadata can be glued together with other data to profile a certain user, and that can be very alarming. I'd like to ask Vlada to explain how we can protect ourselves from such generation of metadata by conferencing apps.
I can only scratch the surface. We'll have another 3 sessions definitely to
Yes. Okay.
dive more into details. But some of the things that the concerns there are actually where the data traveling. We'll have that in the last session of the day. So who is collecting the data, how they're using various data, and then also what are the data there? I mean, it's, as you mentioned, it's both the records and also our personal data, sense of who we are, right? So that's one of the big questions. And then I also wonder, maybe that's a question for all of you, if you had experiences with different platforms, not just Zoom. To what extent have you checked how the personal data are treated there, where they're stored? Is there a privacy policy, and so on? I don't know if anyone, I think Carlos raised a hand, right, Carlos? Or, yeah, sure. Carlos, if you wish, you can jump in. And then Trisha, back to you afterwards.
Yes. Carlos.
Okay. Yes, there is a lot of situations where we can be compromised, actually, in online meetings. And as Trisha has mentioned it before, online Wi-Fi is the first vulnerability. But then there is a lot of others that can be today taken into account. There are the applications that you have in your PC, or some kind of links that maybe you could activate while you're on the meeting that will drive straight away all the flow that is driving by your computer somewhere else, a third party that will be taking and registering all the information that you're passing through. So it's there is several ways where we can get compromised.
Okay, thank you, Carlos, for sharing your thoughts with us. Let's run another poll. Question is, what are the main risks of Zoom bombing? It's very much in the news recently. Oh, wow. Okay. This is an interesting result. Okay, so while we wait, I was wondering if any one of you has already experienced being Zoom bombed, and if you could share the experience with us, and if you did, what particular action did you take so as to prevent it?
And Trisha, if I may, there were 2 questions in the chat, or 2 comments. One was actually from Carlos, who reflected already on that, but that's an interesting point. For instance, the European General Data Protection Directive is taken into consideration by the platforms, particularly those that might not be based in Europe. Now, they should be doing that, but we have more and more new platforms like Zoom emerging, and can we be sure? And second question was from Enrico, who said, who obtains these metadata? So platform owners, or also internet providers and governments? And there I might maybe quickly reflect probably the main, because the data which flows from us, and particularly the data about participants, are usually stored by the servers of the company. So that's mainly the owners of the service, in this case Zoom or whoever. Now they also travel through the internet to reach the server and so on. So the big question is whether, for instance, the data is encrypted, whether someone else can jump in, and then whether the governments can obtain them by the simply the law enforcement authorities within the US or wherever the server is based, whether they should be able or could be able to come there and simply demand to get the data. So just a quick reflection, but I encourage the others to also reflect either in chat or in voice. Lucia, back to you.
Thank you, Vlada. And just to add, when you're shopping for teleconferencing apps, you also have to review their privacy policy, especially if they are compliant with the GDPR. So it's one of the things that you have to consider when you look for your teleconferencing app, if they have this sort of privacy compliance. Okay, now we have the results in. 81% of you said that the main concern or the main reason of Zoom bombing is confidentiality of the meeting, especially if the conversations that you have in the meeting is high. Then you have to consider other platforms. Well, with Zoom, what you can do is that you have to check if you have to identify or verify who your participants are. If your meeting is highly confidential, definitely you don't share files. You have to go for other applications that offers end-to-end encryption so as to be able to protect your data. And another thing is sharing inappropriate content. That's why it's important that when you share the link, you have to put in a password, or there should be authentication measure to prevent any intrusion from your meetings. Moving forward, let's have another poll. We'd like to know how important is discretion of your meetings to you. So while we wait for your responses, anyone who would like to share more about their security concerns? Okay. Okay, while we wait, there are other tips that I'd like to share with you when it comes to organizing your virtual meeting. One is that you have to categorize the level of confidentiality of your meeting. If it's a public meeting, you can use Zoom, or you can use other platforms that doesn't exactly offer encryption. But if you know that the meeting will be very confidential, you have to have security measures in place so as to prevent any other forms of intrusion. And if, for example, it's high risk, totally confidential, you have to go for other platforms that offer end-to-end encryption, such as Cisco WebEx. Don't do any file sharing. And another thing that you can do, if you feel very uncomfortable with someone who's invited you to attend the meeting, please feel to opt out or decline. Okay, now we have the results for our third poll. The top answer is it's very important, which of course it's something that also I think everyone already expected. Okay, moving forward. Yes, Vlada.
Quick reflection again from the chat. So there was the comment, and then Andriana will let us know if we are about to close the session. There was a question from Jacques who said that what makes him particularly uneasy with Zoom and all sorts of the meetings is different ways to record the meeting. So not only within the application itself, but also any sort of screenshots and so on, which is particularly sensitive now as a sort of a threat to privacy as we communicate more and more online. And Jacques will definitely note that, but there is another session on Chatham House Rule where this might be particularly interesting to open up and discuss more. And then Gisela said that she has a concern about personal information. There is a risk of reprisals against human rights defenders in private meetings if someone is infiltrated. Enrico or continue discussing more on the encryption of the data, and Enrico will touch upon that in the last session on data protection as well. Gisela also mentioned the child protection as an issue for child rights organization. And then finally, Carlos said the risk comes from the people that you don't see in the room, but they're just getting the information that would be some sort of, let's say, intruders or something. So we have about a minute more. Trisha, any closing part from you, and then I'll wrap up.
Okay. Probably one of the things that you've been considering when it comes to virtual meetings is convenience, and that you have to give up certain part of your privacy just to submit to sort of convenience. Maybe you think there's a trade-off between convenience and security of your data. But for me, it shouldn't be a trade-off, but rather you have to strike a balance between the two. As humans, we are hardwired to choosing what we find to be convenient for us. So that is why we always go for something that is easy. But you always have to remember that security should trump over convenience. With that, you have to do extra security measures to protect your data, your organization's data, and your participants' data. So that's it from me. Vlada, please close our session. And thank you so much, everyone.
And thank you, Trisha. I forgot to mention that Trisha just completed the online course on e-participation. So it's sort of her primary spot with the diploma to actually moderate the session. Thanks, Trisha, so much for the guidance. It's quite to do it in 15-minute session, but that was the idea. Really, really be short and sweet, and we'll continue. It's hard to pick the main things, but I think this privacy as a major concern is probably the underlying part of the discussion. There were other concerns, particularly related to technical means to ensure privacy and confidentiality, including encryption, policy means such as GDPR, and then various other aspects which maybe we sometimes don't think about, such as human rights and so on, that come as consequences of data breaches. I'll stop there. We're moving to the next session on our agenda in this setting. Now, you can remain in the room if you're interested to follow the next session, which is exactly on Zoombombing, and we'll go more into examples and some measures maybe to take. You can stay in the room if you wish, or you can switch to any other room by going back to the website and clicking on the room you want to be in, and just mix the topics if you wish. And we'll continue in about a minute. Thanks for joining, and well, I hope to see you here in the next session as well. Back in a minute. Okay. I guess we can move on. We have to stick to the schedule, so we'll try to do that. We're moving on to this session, particularly oriented on Zoombombing. Well, we have touched upon that, and that is sort of the concern, obviously, for many people already, whether we have intruders in the room and how to prevent the intruders get into the room. I won't take much time. I think the question is quite clear. How do we prevent intruders? So the format is, again, the same as in the previous one, but maybe for the newcomers here, we'll use both chat and audio video. If you wish to raise the hand or talk with the audio, just raise the hand either with video, and I will try to follow, or you have an option in Zoom to raise a hand, and then the moderator will pass the floor to you. Otherwise, just share your thoughts in the chat. It's my pleasure to introduce the moderator of the session, Andreana Gavrilovic, who will take over from now, lead us through the session, and then I'll try to be the timekeeper and warn when we are up to time. Andreana, the floor is yours.
Many thanks, Vlada, for that kind introduction, and to our participants, good morning, good day, good evening. Let me quickly outline how we'll spend the next 8 minutes. Let's keep it a bit longer than that. We'll quickly go over the concept of Zoombombing and briefly mention some examples. Then we'll dedicate about 5 minutes to the discussion on the main risks of Zoombombing. And afterwards, we'll touch upon the means of Zoombombing and what are the measures that we can take to prevent it. In the end, I will give the floor back to Vlada to try and summarize our discussion in 1 minute. So Zoombombing is when uninvited attendees break into your meeting and disrupt it. That much is pretty clear. Sometimes it's even called Zoom raiding, and it's a phenomena related directly to, as the name itself says, the Zoom video conferencing app, the one we are currently using. Now, why is it related to Zoom specifically? Well, in December 2019, Zoom saw an average of 10 million daily meeting participants. And in April 2020, that number was 300 million meeting participants. So the platform wasn't ready for such a surge in daily meeting participants, but it also wasn't ready for a surge of bad actors. Now, Zoom bombers aren't really hackers per se. They're mostly trolls. They use information that is available to them online or information that is supplied to them by meeting participants. And searches on the major sharing platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube show many instances of Zoom bombing, and so do media headlines. The major platforms so far don't have a specific Zoom bombing policy, and it's up to the victim to report the video to have it removed. Some of the videos that are available show Zoom bombers infiltrating Alcoholics Anonymous and Narcotics Anonymous meetings, which not only show the names of the participants, but also sometimes their faces. So one of the major concerns are the privacy concerns. And Zoom bombing has now been officially made illegal in the USA, as has been warned by the FBI. Now, I would like to ask you, what are your main concerns about Zoom bombing? What do you think are the main risks? Is it the sharing of inappropriate content? Or is it inserting political messages? Is it the confidentiality of the meeting itself? Or are there other concerns that you consider to be more pressing? Please vote in our poll. And if the option you will choose is other pressing concerns, then please feel free to elaborate on this, either in the chat or via a video intervention. But as we just mentioned, keep it short, up to 30 seconds would be amazing. We'll leave the poll up for 30 seconds so everyone can vote. Olaf is saying that the poll isn't up. Let me try again. Olaf, thank you for that note. So, is it now good, Olaf and Richard? Now up, Tersha says. Thank you for that feedback. In the meantime, Che Vesna, I think I'm reading that correctly, says, it is said that Zoom is not a safe place for online meetings as it leaks the private videos of Zoom users and can trace videos for surveillance. Many firms and some countries advise their officials not to use Zoom. What do you think? Of course, I invite all of you to share your views on this in the chat or either by a video. And I think that, well, most of us have voted, but it's only 55% for now, so I'll keep it a few more seconds. So far, it seems that you're mostly concerned about the confidentiality of the meeting, but also sharing of inappropriate content. It seems that inserting political messages is not such a concern so far. And yes, the examples so far have been disrupting online classes and such. We haven't still seen a good example of Zoom bombers being actually politically inclined in any sort of a way. And you are most definitely concerned about the confidentiality of the meeting, and that is what has been not so good in the past period. Thank you for your inputs on this. 70% of you voted, and confidentiality is definitely what concerns you the most. As I said, it remains to be seen what will happen when Zoom bombers get some political motives. Now, what are the means of Zoom bombing? What are the means that you have heard of, or you have experienced. If you would like to share, please go ahead.
In the meantime, Andrea, if you wish, is there someone who wanted to comment?
Olaf says the political messages are inappropriate by definition. Well, I suppose so, yes. But what we meant under inappropriate content, we were mostly speaking about pornography and content like that. It was just very hard to summarize in 2 words all sorts of inappropriate content. Yes, Lara, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. I was not sure whether someone wanted to jump in with the voice. There were a couple of comments in the chat. One was from Chia that whether the Zoom is the safe place as an application itself, because some countries and officials and firms have banned it. There was a reflection that we would need to, of course, know more about Zoom and any application that we use to be able to respond to that. And then there was one, I think, Richard's point. One of the added concerns, is a personal corporate image that can be tarnished, perhaps if someone jumps into the call and so on. So just these 2 points at the moment. Back to you.
Thanks to both of you for your inputs. I definitely must agree. But one interesting comment that I saw in the chat is from Chair, who says, I'm not much concerned with using Zoom, as I mostly disallow my video and I do not discuss much on sensitive politics. Keeping silent is definitely one way of protecting yourself. But to protect your meetings from Zoom bombers, you can either lock them out or kick them out. And by locking them out, you should take measures before you set up your meeting. While you're setting it up, you should check the default settings on any platform you might be using. In this case, it is Zoom. And make sure that those special features that can make a meeting more secure are not enabled by default. For example, a feature that is enabled by default is that participants are allowed to share a whiteboard during a meeting by default. And this, of course, can invite Zoom bombers. So if you disallow this setting, you are essentially locking them out. Then make sure that the option for file transfer is also disabled. Have a co-moderator like I do, thank you Vlada for your assistance, to check up on the chat and to make sure that if someone tries to turn on their video to show something inappropriate, that video is turned off. And on locking them out, this is very important. You can remove a participant from a meeting, but if you leave the option allow removed participants to rejoin, your Zoom bomber might come back in. In that case, you just have to disallow that option. And those are the best ways you can protect your meeting from a Zoom bomber. In any case, lock it with a password. Avoid sharing the link on your social media, on your websites. And also you can enable the waiting room, which means that you will know which participants have registered and you know whom to expect and whom not. Richard is saying, can the lesser version of Zoom of participants affect the meeting of a more updated version of Zoom? Different users using different versions of Zoom. And Olaf is saying all versions are upwards and downwards compatible. I think that Olaf answered that question for you, Richard. Olaf is also saying that I'm assuming he was bombed only once, and each time it looked more like trolling. Yes, that is what Zoombombig looks like right now. It's mostly the professional embarrassment that you will suffer at this point. I will allow one more minute for any comments or inputs, as we are already 3 minutes over our schedule. To be fair, we did start 5 minutes later, so I think that we are doing pretty well. Are there any questions that we haven't answered? Yes, Lara is saying the Zoom is rather secure now. Zoom has heard the concerns and has tried to address them. While they weren't very ready at the beginning, they are now willing to work with their users as much as possible. I think that this would bring our session to the end, and I will give the floor back to Vlada for the final wrap-up. Vlada, over to you.
Thank you, Andriana. I was a little bit disappointed that we haven't heard but one Olaf's experience of being Zoom bombed, and actually I don't know many people that have been. Olaf's experience also is mentioned that it was more like trolling than anything more serious. But it is an issue because it could turn to some political repercussions and so on. Thanks for raising it. I think we opened more questions and actually gave the answers, except for some of the practical ways, such as passwords and not sharing the links publicly and so on, to avoid Zoom bombing and intrusions. And we have quite some materials for the next two rounds of discussions after the coffee break. So I'll stop there. We're turning to coffee break. What you can do now is actually get back to the main website and pick either to go to the coffee break, where we'll spread you randomly around the coffee break tables to meet new people quickly, or you can go to visit the exhibition and then see you back in, well, now about 10 minutes or so, but you'll see that in coffee break. Pick any other room or get back to security. Thank you, and see you soon. Okay, I think we can start the next round. Let me check the program again if it's about time. Yes, 2:15 UTC. I think we can start. Okay, thanks for all that joined this session. Now we're moving to the discussion, which is related to, well, in a way, building up on some of the previous discussions. I don't have I don't know how many people were actually out of you here in the previous two sessions of security. I hope not. I hope you mix it a little bit. But basically, we focus now on discretion and the Chatham House rules. For those that don't know, you'll hear very soon. The format is similar that we had to previous sessions here. Basically, we'll have a moderation, but you can jump in with your comments in the chat window at any time, or you can raise the hand. You have an option in Zoom, or you can simply raise the hand and wave it. I hope we'll see you, and then we'll pass the floor to you at some point. But if you do that, if you want to talk, please make sure that you tweet like 30 seconds max, so that we have enough time. It's my pleasure to introduce the moderator of the session, Andrej Skenjenic, my colleague, who will then give an introduction, and at the end I'll try to wrap up the discussion. Andrej, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vlada. Thank you for the introduction, and welcome to all of you to this session on the Chatham House rule in online meetings environment. The rapid shift of various meetings from in situ to online that all of us have experienced over the past 2 months have raised many questions about the discretion, security, and the applicability of the Chatham House rule in online environment. As you know, the Chatham House rule is the most popular procedural rule in meetings worldwide, and although not legally binding, it is meant to allow participants to feel free to express their own views, ideas, during a meeting that may sometimes differ from the official views of the organization they represent. This is done in order to make people feel more comfortable, more relaxed, and as a result of that, more willing to engage in a constructive exchange of ideas. This is the basic question of today's session, how to ensure that this kind of constructive discretion is kept in online environments. We will touch upon this and a couple of other questions during this session, together with Vlada and with all of you. The point of the session is to be as interactive as possible. So as Vlada already mentioned, if you have any questions, if you have any comments, please do not hesitate to let us know. You can either type them in the chat or raise your hand to unmute and join the call. The Chatham House rule was first established in 1927, and as such, it's obvious that it was meant for in situ meetings, and often for a group of peers, such as diplomats, who were already familiar with the proverbial rule of the game, and they knew how to mitigate and how to deal with risks and potential threats. The online environment, however, causes a whole new set of different issues. One such issue is obvious: how to ensure the confidentiality, bearing in mind that meetings are recorded and that the digital recording of meeting can easily be shared with others, with people who are not originally meant to attend the meeting, or even with the wider audience, the wider public via social media. Another question is the question of responsibility. Who should be responsible for ensuring the confidential and safe space for honest and frank exchange of ideas? Should that be organizers or the participants themselves? We also have the issue of intruders or maybe even hackers who can exploit the vulnerability of the platform to hijack the meeting for whatever purpose they have in mind. One not that obvious issue is the question of communication. We as humans have evolved to convey almost 70% of the messages that we want to share with someone else through a nonverbal communication. Body gestures, facial expressions, tone of voice, the way how we greet each other, the way how we shake hands, etc. These forms have evolved to soothe the social interaction and to help build trust. In an online environment, this is missing. When we are addressing someone directly to the computer or to the camera, as I'm doing now, I don't have this feel and this sense of who it is that I'm interacting with. And as a result, it is only not natural for me to feel a bit hesitant and reluctant to express my true ideas and my true views. This goes directly against the very point of the Chatham House rule. Before we move on to discussing possible or potential solutions and the way how to work around these problems, I would like to ask you to take a part in a very short survey. It will be conducted here within Zoom. The survey is entitled "How Important is Discretion of Online Meetings to You?" with 1 being not important at all and 5 being very extremely important. We will share the results with you shortly in a few minutes. Having outlined all these problems with the communication and the discretion during the online meeting, it is obvious that a solution for these problems will have to be systematic. Just like the Chatham House rule, when first established in 1927, was meant for the in situ meetings, it is more than obvious that one such rule, either new one or revised Chatham House rule, will have to be adopted for the online meeting. However, until that happened, we who are taking part in these meetings on a daily or on a weekly basis, we have to have a way how to work around these solutions. To me, possible way how to do that is twofold. First, there is a technical aspect. Should we anonymize the data? How to ensure the safeguard and protection of data, including personal data of the speakers who participated in the meeting? Should we perhaps encrypt the way how we conduct our online meetings? Should we try to find or develop a platform that will ensure that the data is protected. These and many others technical issues will be discussed during the next session that will start in this same room, entitled Data Protection and Confidentiality. Here, I would like to focus on the things that are a bit harder to define, the so-called human touch, the human element of attending and taking part in an online meeting, both on behalf of the organizers and on behalf of the participants. When it comes to organizers, I think that they should be honest and transparent about the possible risks. When they communicate the meeting to participants, they have to be honest, and they have to be very well prepared in order to anticipate and solve those problems in advance. Last, but definitely not the least, is that they have to have empathy and understanding for all the concerns, problems, fears, or doubts the participants express to them either during the organization of meeting or at the very beginning. Working together on resolving those issues will help build trust, thus replace the lack of nonverbal communication that was mentioned before. So I think this is very important a very important role on the part of the organizers. When it comes to participants in online meetings, things are pretty much straightforward. It's a question of common sense. They also have to be aware of these problems, and they should not do something that they know can easily be used against them or the organization they represent during the meeting, if it is a formal one. Related to that is, again, preparation. The more you prepare, the more you go through your speaking points or the bullet list or the presentation you have prepared, you will be able to notice the weak spots of your presentation, try to find a way how to work around them, how to counteract the attacks that may come from others in a way that will help you articulate your message in a way that it is very clear and it is as bulletproof as possible. This way, even should the recording of the meeting leaks out and gets online, you will still have security in knowing that the message you have presented is very valid, is very coherent, and is in line with what it originally was that you wanted to say. I would also like to use this opportunity to ask you to jump in and to share your views on these issues, and if you yourself have any tips and tricks on how to work around that. I see that we have had quite an interesting and lively, that we have some comments in the chat.
Andre, if I may, there was an interesting comment. I think it was actually Olaf who was here, or someone else raised in the previous session, which was the concern that today with these online meetings, more and more options are there for anyone who is in the meeting to actually record it. So it's not just within the application, but also, you know, screenshots or whatever. And that in that sense, controlling the people not to go beyond the Chatham House rule is also a problem. And there is one comment by Sophia in the chat who says, as a diplomat, to me, to the vary if I am in the meeting as a representative of my country or off-duty character. And I guess that's also important in the position.
Yeah, it is very important, but I'm afraid that the line is getting blurred. In this time of age, where whatever and wherever we go and whatever we say, if recorded, it can be linked to us and to our personal profile. And even if we said something in a personal capacity, it can be used against us, and it can be used against the institution that we work for. So it is very very tricky. Okay, we are slowly running out of time. Actually, we ran out of time. So I will now ask Vladimir to wrap up this this session. And I would like to thank you for taking your time to join us here and to attend this session. Vlada, over to you.
Thank you, Andre. Definitely what was interesting for me is that over 80% of you actually thought that the discretion is important or very important, and there are a lot of discussions in whether we should be able to accept the bigger risk than which we had in the offline space, and whether we should be able or willing to sometimes give up on some of the confidentiality and discretion. But it seems like it's not, which is an interesting showcase. And then, of course, a number of concerns when it comes to the risks, the increasing risks with the online, with new platforms, with, as we mentioned, many people that can actually endanger, and then what we could do about it, except for trying to introduce some sort of safety measures and digital hygiene, and obviously trust in others, that we can't do much more than trust the others that they're not going to disclose, probably as similarly as in the real space. And there were two other comments I can close with that. One was from Henriette, who said it is hard to ensure Chatham House rules. It's always been hard, but it is more harder than ever, probably with the online space. And Gisela, who said, I guess it will be important for meeting hosts to state that Chatham House rules applies at the beginning and the end of the meeting, definitely. And Olaf, who says, I would consider any and all chat rooms of the sort of Zoom, Skype, Teams, and inherently indiscreet, so that we have a different starting position in a way. Well, now you opened up, but I'll read Tere's also comment, and then we close with that. I think that it is very important to establish trust with the participants in a meeting with Chatham House rules. So it's very challenging for online meetings when there's so much elements that you cannot control. And that's probably the good bottom line, that besides all the technologies, we ultimately had to get back to trust into people we are working with. Otherwise, technologies probably can't help much. I think this is a good closing, and thanks all for the inputs. Thanks Andre for a good overview of the challenges. We close this session. We have another session, last session of the security block, where we discuss about data protection and confidentiality in a way. So if you want to stay for that session, we'll start in a minute. You can just stay in the room. Otherwise, you'll feel free to go back to the main website and pick any of the other remaining rooms to see or participate in a different topic. We have another 15 minutes of discussions on this, and then we'll break into coffee breaks. So I'll be back to you in a minute with the next topic. Stay with us or change the room. Okay, time to move on. Well, for those of you that might be new in this session or in the security track of the session, a quick reminder of the format of discussions. So the focus of the discussion will be on data protection and confidentiality. So basically focusing on what can leak, what we need to protect, how it could leak, and so on and so forth in the online environment. When it comes to interaction in the group, I encourage you to, certainly you can share all of your thoughts in the chat window, and my colleague Andriana will help me with introducing some of the bits from the chat as well. I'll try to follow. But as well, you can raise the hand either with the video and just wave it, or use the function of raise hand. And I encourage you to do that, and I'll pass you the floor for brief comments. I will moderate this session. My name is Vladimir Radulovic. I'll moderate this session, and as a maybe going straight to the question, the first question that we might have is what are the data that we actually want to protect? So I kindly ask you to share in the chat, or just raise the hand again. What are the type of data that we want to protect? What are the type of data that we are concerned about when it comes to the online meetings? So obviously there are recordings, right, and some other things. But what other type of data? What type of data you might be the most concerned when it comes to the online meetings? Any points from your side that you want to share? Anyone who wants to raise their hand and jump in. So what sort of data are you most concerned, or what sort of data you think that we should be protecting? What is the asset in this online discussion? That's Olaf, that you mentioned, where are the data of this session kept? That's actually the next question I wanted to jump in. I firstly wanted us to map the type of data that we are looking at. So let's say, and I encourage you to jump in chat or just raise the hand. We certainly have the data, which is now our communication. So it's audio and video, which is transferring between us. That's one type of data we want to protect, that no one can interfere. The other one is the recordings of that, right? And they will be somewhere stored if they are. So that's another type of data that we maybe want to protect. What else? Would you be concerned whether your chat records is also leaking, or whether someone can access to the chat records of whether it's Zoom or it doesn't matter? What else? File and shares and screen shares. Yes, exactly. I mean, in many cases with the business meetings, we actually share the screens which show the documents, so that if that's part of the, or share the files that we want to exchange to open up, or the links and so on, that is also very sensitive data. Edith says mistakenly shared data. I'm not sure, Edith, I understand what you refer to. You can jump in to explain if you wish further. And as you do that, I'm moving on to the very closely related aspect to that. And then also the personal data, we discussed it in one of the previous sessions, the personal data. So who is in the chat, who is participating in a meeting, any sort of data that can relate to us as personal information is also part of the sensitive information. Let me know if you think of anything else that we should consider as an asset in this. Jack says, what about right we forgotten, forget my contributions, including chat? And then Edith says, when making presentation, I occasionally share the wrong screen. Okay, so if you accidentally share something, which can happen, right? Particularly if you are on the communication channel like Skype or something else in the background, then you can reveal some things that you didn't want to. Right, to be forgotten. So let's move to that second part of the question that Olaf initiated already. If we mapped what are the assets, then the second question is, what should we think about? So Olaf asked where the data stored, particularly of this session. That's one of the questions. So where are the data stored? What are other questions that you would ask, let's say the Zoom platform or Adobe or Cisco, when you need to make an informed decision which platform to use? So what are the other questions you would ask to the platform? I'll start brainstorming, but please jump in or just again raise the hand. So where are they? What is the jurisdiction? The legal jurisdiction of the place where the data is stored. And even if Zoom is the US company, maybe the data may be stored somewhere else. So somewhere else, some other authority, law enforcement, could come and demand this data. Then probably the question is, how are they stored? So what is the type of protection for the data? I guess good question, Jack. Who is Zoom? Yeah, that's also a good question. So legally and also behind that, who are the personalities behind storing? Whether there is encryption or not. So whether they are protected on the servers or not. Whether our communication, the flow of data between me and you, is encrypted or not. It's another question. Then definitely I would ask them what data they are storing and what data they're not storing. Then the next question is, for how long they're storing the data, right? The next question might be, who would they give it to? Would they give it to law enforcement or not? And you had the case of Apple, who didn't want to give or couldn't decrypt the data. Then we have Jacques, who added, could I somehow oppose to Zoom's general condition? That's also a good question. Do we have a choice when it comes to privacy policies or any other policies related to the platform, or you simply have to go with take it or leave it? That's another question. The good question is also when you install an app. So which data on your computer the app should be able to access, whether it's a microphone and contacts and other, and when and how to be used. Another concern, Edith says, I often have is disgruntled staff sharing meeting recordings. Good point. The leakages of any sort of information from the employees in the company is also a very important question. Okay, so let me maybe move on to, let me see, Jack says, what if DiploFoundation only offers me participation through Zoom? What is DiploFoundation's role? That's also a good question. So what is the responsibility of the organization that makes a pick to the platform? Increasingly, the platforms are trying to make some sort of a bridge so that you can organize a meeting and offer multiple platforms support within that meetings. And I guess there will be sort of a interoperability that we are going towards, and this might reduce the risk, but that's a good question. Some universities ban Zoom. We had question in a previous chat to what extent Zoom might be bad. And reading a lot about it, I can tell you it's not a danger, not any more than any other, but we certainly have to be cautious and informed, right? So transparency is important. And moving to the next question, which is, what are the risks? So if we identified what data and how they should be stored and protected, what are the risks? And back to you, what do you see as the risks? So firstly, where could the documents of any sort that we mentioned leak from? It could be a computer, it could be in transfer, it could be in servers. So what could be the leak be from? And then second, who would like to get your data? That's also a question. Who are you afraid? I'll get back to that in a second. Anyone wants to jump in with voice? You're all shy. I mean, I can talk for hours, you know, those that know me, but Olaf, do you want to jump in? Should we unmute you? Olaf, you wanted to jump in? You're unmuted if you wish. Okay, or just write it down. Olaf said, how do I know that the 5 sisters haven't established a backdoor into the common location platform that I'm using? Very important question. 5 sisters is, I guess, here the reference to Five Eyes Security consortium of the 5 big countries. The question about backdoors and whether the encryption even has a backdoor is an important question. And for most of the applications, it's a black box. It's really hard to know. So we might put up the poll that I wanted to share with you to check your concerns. So who are you most concerned of? So we can put the poll on, Andriana. The question is, who do you fear the most to get your conversation? It could obviously be many actors around, from disgruntled employees, as Edith said, I think, to competition, criminals, journalists, states. So who do you fear the most? Well, maybe we should have even added the family. I mean, that's whether some people are concerned whether the family members will get to something that we don't want. What do we have for the moment? We have the state as 40%, but it's not that many of you still that have voted. So please take your vote. Competition and criminals are growing. And that's probably interesting, because these are different levels of protection, obviously, for the states. And as Olaf mentioned, the Five Eyes or any other security services, they might have much more resources and the ways to get into the communications on one hand. And certainly not everyone is, or every type of the meeting is of concern for the state. So we might not always be concerned whether the state is interested in our discussions or not, practically, not as a concept. Or the right. And then the problem is whether the criminals or the competition could possibly break the encryption, get into what we have shared, what we have recorded on the servers with ourselves on our computers. As we mentioned in the previous session, we all can record the meeting now in the local machine in Zoom or in other platform. So can we trust the others to maybe keep the confidentiality and so on? So that's also a very good question. You can continue voting. We have a couple of more minutes. So probably the last question for you is, what can we do? So I ask you now to just shoot in chat, or again, if anyone wants to raise a hand. What are the measures? What do you do to protect your meeting from well, the data leakages and the confidentiality of the meeting? So what are your rules of the thumb when it comes to protecting the confidentiality of the meeting and possible leakage of data? Let me see if there is anyone who raised anything. So Sarah mentioned, actually my concern would be more private companies using or selling data for their profit. That's also a good question, whether Zoom or Google or Adobe would actually use our data to sell them, right, for the commercial purposes. When it comes to responses, Edith said ensure robust policies. Quite well, that's something we raised at the beginning. So we need to know what the policies are, and certainly the implementation or the control of these policies, accountability. Then Olaf says encourage an open source communication platform, for example, Signal, as otherwise I would not trust the confidentiality of anything said or filmed. Good point. I mean, I think the topic of open source is a big one. There are a lot of pros. There are certain concerns as well, because then you expect that someone will make sure that the open source platform is checked, but you don't know. So that's certainly there. Even the platforms which we have within the on Dipl's website, we have a comparison of the platforms basically, and there's some of the, like Jitsi, I think, and some of the other open source platforms that you can play with if you wish, and probably make sure you can be more confident when it comes to security. I think we can close the polling. So the criminals in the States are sort of in a lead of the threats, and then the competition is also there to some extent. Then Jack says currently these platforms only respond to data protection authorities and only to the bigger ones. Make sure that they have a sharp eye on the platforms. Good point. So we have to focus also on the platforms when it comes to data protection authorities. Sarah says, I've learned several tips to protect data in meetings today. Thank you. But I could probably in the closing just add that we need also basic steps of digital hygiene on our side. So basically, make sure that you secure your devices and connections. Make sure that you secure your accounts with multi-factor authentication. Make sure that you double check the application access and what the application can access on your devices. Certainly try to select the encryption-enabled platforms, well, if needed, do the encryption on your end as well. And maybe make sure that you can actually, that the interlocutors do the same levels of scrutiny on their side as well, if that is possible. Ensure that you have efficient stuff as well. Yeah, definitely. And then Jacques says, there is also the issue that only few of the platforms will survive competition law issue. And I would probably close by building up on that, Jacques, that I think the user demand is something that we need to drive. That if we as users demand safer and more privacy protecting platforms rather than, cheaper, shinier, whatever we usually do with phones and so on, that will definitely help. Excellent. Thank you a lot for joining the discussion. Thank you for your inputs, even though you have been sort of shy to open up the microphones, but very, very useful comments in the chat. Okay, we'll pause for a coffee break now. We're moving to the exhibition for 10 minutes, or the coffee break or exhibition. It's up to your choice. I encourage you to also see the exhibition if you haven't. And please join us in the main room after the coffee break or exhibition. So then we have 10 minutes break. And the main room link is again on the website, and we'll post it as well in the chat now. Thanks for joining, and see you later in the main room. Bye-bye.